was our sleeper hit. So we saw, a lot of performance on Facebook. We saw a lot of performance on LinkedIn and Twitter. But then Instagram was the runaway takeaway hit, and actually it's been, what our members are using now. So sometimes you can find out things that are really surprising. We found it out probably 2 or 3 years ago before the curve. So,
how many people in here currently use something like Cision or Biltmore to measure?
Oh, good. A few.
What I would add to that, and based on my previous role and what I've done, is go in and work with associations on what they're doing and trying to help them do things better. I'm not in the weeds figuring out how to do it like you have. They usually have the tools that you're talking about or would consult with you. But I left a role and I'm starting another one, and in the meantime I've been doing some hands in the dirt work for a nonprofit. So it's interesting because I used to tell my team, well, just plug it into this and do that, and I would research and try to find the best, most reputable tools for them to use. But now that I have to do it myself, I think, oh, it was so unfair that I would just think, just do that and it'll, magic will happen, not realizing how much time goes into it. So what I've also tried to do, just to take a different tact, is goal setting, obviously, when you're using those things and trying to see where your audience is primarily, and trying to, see where my baseline is, where what I'm shooting for next, and whether that's a 5%, 10% increase, because you can make it happen, but it's difficult to get there, so you need those tools to give you the feedback, obviously, to tell you where your members are going.
And absolutely, I think benchmarking is absolutely critical, because you're thinking about this year over year over year. I think, 10 years ago, Twitter didn't have a whole lot of penetration. There was so many conversations, especially in the association. Well, where's the ROI? What do I want about it with this? And now we know that obviously it's such a really crucial communications tool. One thing that we focused on a lot at ASAE was, doing that benchmarking, doing that survey work, but also trying to identify for new technologies, who are the people who are the prime movers, who are the people who are using it. 3 years ago, who were the people in our community who were really engaged with Instagram? And what can you do to directly connect with those people? Can you make sure that you support them in some special way during a meeting, acknowledge them in some other way, communicate with them to find out how they're using it? Getting in touch with those first prime movers in your community who are communicating about your association to the wider community can really help in getting those first steps.
Well, speaking of that, obviously we all work with CPAs, and sometimes you got to drag them kicking and screaming into any new technology. So how would you encourage or foster early adoption, or try to get them on board with some of these things that we're trying so hard to get them to use, because we know it will make their lives just a little bit easier and they'll be more engaged with us, which would therefore make our lives easier.
I can speak to that. So one thing that we saw is we, like you, had an annual session or a big annual meeting, and it was during Superstorm Sandy, and we were going right up to Biltmore. So we kind of used it as almost as an emergency contact to let everybody know about the meeting and just to make sure that people were really engaged. And we saw our people actually adopt it once we got some meaningful piece of content out there where they realize, oh, well, this is actually more of an information tool and a connection tool in a rapid fire way. So we found that was very helpful, actually, just to have something with that, but then also controlled content. I think if you can kind of give them content, some people will like to be on TV, some people will like to do radio or podcasts, and some people will like to write. And some people like to do none of it. But if you can find your people that like to do those different things, even having a leader, and you kind of walk them through so that it's going to be a guaranteed success, so they're going to look good, then they'll feel more confident. So even if you film that video in that studio, and you get them to really talk about their expertise and loosen up a little bit, just saving that, letting them review it, and then putting it on the platform, they seem to be more comfortable with.
I think it's important too to almost train them how best to use social media, because with the average age of association executives now, I think a lot of people, my parents, a lot of people are on Facebook because they get to see everybody's kids and all the pictures, but they're really not, they're slow to adopt Twitter instead of some of the other things. So do you all, I'm sure a lot of people in this room are familiar with Beth Zanesis.
My Nerdy
My
Best
Nerdy
Friend.
Best Friend. So first of all, that's a great book, but I worked with an association in Chicago, and they would have her speak at their annual convention. She had a session like this, where she gave all these really fun tips, and she makes it a lot of fun too. Just to get them to understand that it's not just about looking at baby pictures, you know, you can subscribe to what you want, and it's a really good news source, really, if you think about it. Twitter can be a good news source. It can also be very depressing. So I think that's important, just sort of having sessions at your annual conference, to even if you just have one session talking about the power of social media, and just give them that insight, start at a beginner level and have some advanced tips. I think that they get a lot out of that.
And I think even some basic steps to just model the behavior you're hoping to see, or just model what it might look like. I'm thinking, for example, I wrote recently about the National Auctioneers Association, and they are moving into a system where they're trying to do more just-in-time learning, and that's based on video, so a short video about training to do simple tasks. And they want to get more and more of their members engaged, people who have expertise on this, but they know that they actually do have a fairly old membership who are a little bit skittish about video. But they've made a series of very short videos, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minute, whatever, done off of phones, talking about very sort of micro-learning sort of things, just like very simple tasks that are related to their association and their industry's work. And once the association took the lead with people who were comfortable with doing that, it becomes less intimidating for the other members to look at that and say, oh, I know how to do this, and I can talk about that for 2 minutes. That's not a problem whatsoever. So, I mean, that's a case where the association has to take the lead a little bit and say, okay, well, you're not sure how to do it, well, here's how we do it.
How many of you have social media training for your members? You do that, actually. Does it work for you?
I work for the AICPA, so I'm actually one who travels to developers in the States.
Oh, interesting. Oh, excellent.
You might get some new gigs for you.
We've done some social media training at our big annual trade shows. 2 years in a row. 2 years ago, we had a big crowd. Next year, we had 5 people.
Really?
Huh.
Oh,
Maybe that's good. They know how to use it.
Right.
but,
Right.
like, we're not doing it this year.
okay.
It's bad.
Yeah, Maureen.
We had social media tables like at our conferences, and so we would be there. We would actually even have games like take pictures of the table, say, you know, what do you expect to hear at this conference or learn today, and then somebody would win like a Bluetooth speaker or stuff like that. We really did not have much success. Like people, and you know how shy I am. And I would be like attacking people like, come here, why don't I show you how to download this? And they just, and what was really interesting is that like the technology and like forensic conferences were the worst. These people, they're not getting on anything.
Right.
Because they're just afraid of.
When you have to use that what's in it for me approach, you know,
Yeah.
like can it grow their business, can it grow their professional network,
Right.
you know, how can it impact them? That's interesting with the technology groups. I bet security groups are.
One thing I found that was good was when I create the spokesperson's network a few times over, and there are those people. It's just sometimes you just don't know where to find them. I mean, some people want to do it, or they think, oh, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. But there's always a few doctors or dentists or accountants or lawyers who do want the limelight.
It's an ego thing.
It's an ego thing. So you can kind of, in some ways, you know, you may want to try to fill the room with those people, especially younger people too. I don't know. Do you have a lot of multi-generational members? You do. So sometimes it can be reverse mentoring. That can be fun, and people can enjoy that, you know, where a millennial teaches the next generation, no, you really need to get on this and do this. And that's where your members are going anyway. So, you know, just kind of maybe buddying them up might make some nice relationships.
And if you give them a role, I mean, some associations have made those people ambassadors at their meeting. Like, you know, they're the people who own the subject matter for like a Twitter chat 2 weeks before the event, or they're speaking out about things. And that may be for, if the dynamic is such that you have older members who are like, I don't know, why are these people talking about the association so much? That can maybe help spark some more interest in some of that engagement, because they're letting those people, you know, claim a fair bit of the conversation around the meeting.
And I also started with LinkedIn. So, you know, that's kind of a safe place to start for
Yeah,
professionals.
sure.
Kimberly,
Yeah, I found, a couple things that we did were successful with getting more members was, number one, in our e-newsletters, if we had a student event or where there were a lot of pictures or something like that, I would link directly from our e-newsletter to the social media album. And then people were interested in looking at those pictures, and we would get people actually following our page like that. And then also, when we would, if we put an album on Facebook, I would actually leak from Facebook to Twitter that copy that link to that album too, and crossing platforms, so we got some people following us on multiple platforms.
Or even putting like a share this button on your webpage, so if people find something that resonates with them, you're essentially like feeding them the information through channels versus them having to do all the work. It's like, here, let me help you.
Right.
That's great. I'll add one thing that we did interestingly at in my last role. We had an association that was, tough adoption with social media, and the board really wanted to push it out. And so we had someone on our team who created tweets for the board every week. On Monday, he sent them out to the board, and the board, they all agreed, if we're gonna do this, we all have to be on board, and they would just cut and paste and put it on their Twitter feed. So then the members started to say, okay, maybe I should follow this a little more. And I don't know that it had great success, but it did sort of help get the word out there that people were trying to do something different.
with all the different social media platforms that come out, and it seems like there's a new one every single day, how do you prioritize? Like, where do you say, I'm going to take this and not do this, or do you take? Is it like buying shoes where you're supposed to, like, as soon as you buy one pair, you got to get rid of a pair or something?
I've never heard of that. La 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 la.
Yeah, once you're in it, they're gonna want you to stay.